told me they feel like they are second-class law enforcement because they're not protected the same way other law enforcement is, and that's wrong. The fairness issues come up all the time. That's a big deal. I knew that others would focus on that, but my focus was I get these calls, and I get these corrections officers that are very upset. They don't know what's going on. They don't know how to be involved, and we have to pick through the code. We have to have our lawyers look at what we can do, what we can't do, and again, this law will bring them into the fold, make it relatively universal how we handle these cases, and can assist the members. And again, getting a lawyer in the room when the initial investigation is being done, that's not, I don't believe this bill does that. There is a certain point where a lawyer can be involved, but there are certain points where the administration does have access to that member to do their investigation. Generally, the lawyers come into play later where they can come in and officially represent the member. But with our organization, as soon as the member calls, we assign an attorney and get him involved in the process, gathering documents and getting everything together. And again, this process helps them do what they need to do to represent themselves.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
Doug Rousseau.
Move to report.
I do say that, yeah.
There's a motion on the table to report and properly second. Please indicate your wishes on the electronic voting board. Okay, please close the roll. The motion carries 4-2.
Thank you, Mr.
Kelly.
Chairman.
Delegate Guzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here to introduce House Bill 250. I wanted to make sure that you have an amendment, the amended version.
Third line amendments. I need to report line amendments if they're wrong.
Okay, Council.
Mr. Chairman, on line 14, after 15 members, you insert a period, and then the language 13 members are. On line 17, after requirements, you strike all the new language through with fire service experience on line 18, and you add in instead a local fire marshal as defined by 27-30. And then on line 18, after the semicolon A, after semicolon A, so before fire service instructor, on line 18, you insert certified Virginia. So we would read a certified Virginia fire service instructor.
Can you repeat the first part of that amendment real quick, just so I make sure I heard it?
The First Amendment is really technical. It's on line 14. After it says the board shall consist of 15 members, you insert a period, and then 13 members are, because only 13 of the members are actually appointed by the governor. The other 2 are ex officio members who aren't appointed by the governor. So that's just cleaning up language that currently says the governor appoints everybody, even though he doesn't.
Okay, there's the amendment.
Oh, I move the second.
All right, the amendment's moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, the bill as amended is before us. Delegate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members to the subcommittee. This bill is seeking to amend the Code of Virginia regarding the composition of the Virginia Fire Services Board. This bill will remove the state fire marshal as a member of this board and will replace it with a local fire marshal instead. This bill will further remove the Virginia Society of Fire Service Instructors as a member of this board because that entity no longer exists in Virginia. In its place, we would like to include a certified Virginia Fire Service instructor. This will allow qualified Virginia Fire Services instructors an opportunity to serve on this board. A little background, in 2008, the State Fire Marshal's office was transferred from the Department of Housing and Community Development to the Virginia Department of Fire Programs. As a result of that transfer, the State Fire Marshal became an employee of the Virginia Department of Fire Programs. For the Executive Director of Fire Programs, this director is authorized to employ the state Fire Marshal and other personnel necessary to carry out the provisions of the statewide fire prevention code. For that reason, the use of a local fire marshal will provide an individual with the greatest level of interaction with local government, businesses, and constituents of Virginia, an opportunity to serve on the Fire Services Board. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, the Virginia Fire Service instructors no longer exist in the Commonwealth. Therefore, in its place, this agency is looking to insert a certified Virginia Fire Service instructor, because we believe that instructors have the power to transform the lives and well-being of fire and emergency management services providers everywhere in the Commonwealth. The membership on the Fire Services Board will guarantee such a transformation.
Thank you. Any questions of the patron from the committee?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Brewer.
Thank you, Delegate Usman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I take public safety very seriously. I mean, this is no laughing matter. Why do we think it's a good idea to remove the state fire marshal? And how did this bill come about?
Well, thank you, Delegate Brewer. I'm as concerned as you with public safety. Actually, my background is in public safety. I hold a degree in public safety. And we are actually replacing the state with a local fire marshal. So we are not getting rid of the fire marshal at all. We are just changing it from a state to local. And the reason is because there is a conflict of interest, because the state of fire marshal now reports to the executive director. So that's why we believe that putting a local person instead with the same background but who report to local government, it's a better fit.
Any further questions? I'm sorry, Delegate Brewer.
So it's your opinion that the state fire marshal has a conflict of interest, is that what you're saying? Yes. When it comes to public safety, we have to be, very, very clear in a situation such as this. It's no laughing matter. So, what local fire marshal, what is your reasoning? How are you gonna go about selecting that person? I don't see the need for the bill.
Well, I have experts here who could provide you an answer.
Yeah, perhaps now would be a good time to have someone come forward.
Thank you, Delegate.
Yep.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman,
Morning.
delegates. My name is Mike Riley. I'm the Executive Director of Fire Programs, newly appointed, so it's a pleasure to be here. I'm here representing the Governor and the Secretary of Homeland Security and Public Safety, and both support this bill. And I'll certainly address your concerns. But prior to being the Executive Director of Fire Programs, I spent 36.5 years as a Fairfax County firefighter and the last several years as a Fairfax County Fire Marshal. I also spent 8 years on the Virginia Fire Services Board and 4 years on the Department of Housing and Community Development, representing public safety for the Commonwealth of Virginia. While I served on the board from 2004 to 2012, during that time, the Fire Marshal's Office from the state was assigned to the Department of Housing and Community Development and had a position on the Virginia Fire Services Board. 2008, the State Fire Marshal's Office was transferred to the Department of Fire Programs, and hence now works for me. And so in order to avoid a conflict of interest in which the governor and perhaps even the executive director was taking a position on public safety, the State Fire Marshal now would be in opposition, potentially opposition. What we've done though with this Fire Marshal position is while we took him out of a voting position, he still remains a very important member of the staff and will be monitoring and sitting in these meetings, providing expert testimony and guidance to the members of the board. In addition, the State Fire Marshal sits on the Code Development Committee, which is a subcommittee of the Virginia Fire Services Board, which promulgates the Code of Virginia for Virginia's fire service safety. So really what we're doing is we're actually enhancing the ability of that Fire Marshal, State Fire Marshal remains as an active member of that board and a participating member. And we also have a local fire marshal who now can add their technical expertise to that same committee. I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Any other questions of the witness?
And if I just convey,
Please.
talk about the instructor side.
Please.
There is an International Association of Fire Service Instructors on a national level, and they disbanded their Virginia chapter a number of years ago. So this amendment for addressing the local fire instructor will now make it possible for a local instructor that teaches within the Commonwealth of Virginia to be appointed by the board. And as instructed how this position will be filled, there's a membership application, obviously, for any position to be appointed by the governor. They can be recommended by stakeholders, or they can voluntarily submit their own application that will be reviewed and adjudicated by the governor's office to make sure that they're best suited for that position.
And we're talking about that local.
The local fire marshal, that's correct, as well as the instructor.
Okay, anyone else speaking in favor of the measure? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Anyone in opposition? Okay, is there a motion?
Motion PBI.
Second.
All right, there's a motion to pass the bill by. Okay, indicate so on your voting board. Okay, the motion to pass by fails. Okay, yeah,
Move to report the chairman.
now there's a motion to report the measure. And it's I'm sorry, properly second, properly second, all right, there's a excuse me? Yes, yes, as amended. All right, and, so, all those in favor of reporting the bill indicate so on the electronic voting board. Okay, there is a tie, so the motion, there's three, close the roll. And the motion has a 3-3, which is a tie, so the measure fails to report. Thank you, Delegate. Delegate Angle, my apologies, sir. You've been here a while.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My bill is, well, it's really the speaker's bill, but,
Move to report.
House Bill 1163. This bill was requested by Colonial Heights Fire Department, Speaker Cox, to serve as a patron. Currently, the code allows Arlington County, as a matter of fact, it says they shall, okay? Fire Department, and only Arlington, to require applicants for employment to undergo a fingerprint-based criminal history background check through the Central Criminal Records Exchange and the FBI. The Colonial Heights Fire Department, and I imagine others, would like the ability to run this sort of background check. Firefighters and first responders are often entering people's homes dealing with sensitive personal situations. It is important for fire departments to be able to know an applicant's criminal record history before offering him or her employment. This practice has already taken place in Arlington, and this bill would simply allow, it's permissive. It takes out shall and puts may. Or simply allow other fire departments to utilize the same practice. Mr. Chairman, I don't know of any opposition to the bill. I have not heard of any opposition, and only favorable.
Okay, any,
Second.
let's, I'll take that motion in jest, as it was intended. Any questions of the patron from the committee? Anyone in audience wishing to speak in favor of the measure? In favor? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Anyone in opposition to the measure? Okay.
Move to report.
There we go. There's a motion to report and properly seconded. All those in favor signify with the electronic voting board. Everybody voted that wishes to vote?
Yes.
There we go. Okay, please close the rolls. The motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Delegate, Bloxham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. House Bill 1340 came out of the recurrent flooding study. And I'm going to actually ask the committee to consider it in PBI. What we have is a situation where small businesses close after a disaster 25% of the time. And the quicker you can get them to open, the quicker or the more chance they have to stay open. So what we were asking in this bill was a 15-day requirement to inspect to try to reopen. That's probably too short of a time. I think the health department, building inspectors, everyone's talked to me about that issue. They understand the problem. I just wanted to bring it up from the committee to let you know that this is something that we need to have a plan. It's not when a big storm might hit the coast. It's probably, when. So we need to make sure that we're ready to respond, not unlike what happened in Texas. When they flooded out, I mean, some of those places never reopened again. So that's why the bill's brought forward. It is a committee. It was a sister companion to Stiley's bill that he brought earlier this morning. I think his was sent to appropriations. This too would have fiscal impact. But I think with the short time in it, I'd just prefer that y'all PBI.
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Rasul.
Just briefly, I hope that, we could somehow try to think through this in the future. Because I know that there's a lot of frustration, when these kinds of instances hit. So I appreciate the patron bringing this forward. Hopefully in the future, we can figure something out.
Thank you. Well, don't really see a lot of need for more questions or comments from the patrons asking for this bill to be passed by. I'll entertain a motion. So moved. Moved and seconded that we pass by indefinitely House Bill 1340. All those in favor signify on the electronic voting board. One more that would like to vote?
Mine's not coming up.
Just keep pushing. That's what I.
There's nothing.
Oh, really? You don't even have a button?
Trying to vote. I intend to vote. Yes. Just nothing came up.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
See how you guys feel about me.
The motion to pass by indefinitely passes 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any, I don't see any other legislators. We have a number of bills, but Mr. Chairman, look at Delegate O'Quinn.
I know we had an instance earlier where there was a bill still in the committee that was supposed to be PBI as a letter sent. Are there any others on the list that are still hanging out there that need that motion?
That's a good question. Was that one that we had earmarked to?
We heard it, and the idea was that the chairman writing, to the state police to look at the background check process, which is what the substance of the bill was to ask state police to do a study in the first place, so.
So, Mr. Chairman, would it be a proper
Department of State Police, Delegate Rock's bill, been motioned to, pass it by with a letter.
You need a second?
Yes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify on the voting board.
Yay.
Did you get it?
Okay, close the rolls. The measure carries 6-0. Okay. Council, do you see any others? Okay. Yeah. Okay. But, yeah, let's, all right, Doug and Corey. Yes, please.
Oh, well, I'll just shout.
Yep, talk loud, Doug and Corey.
Unfortunately, that's one thing I'm not that good at. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and, please do me the favor, if you see my lips moving and you can't hear me, wave your hand or something. Okay, thank you. I am here today to present House Bill 83, and my first request is to ask the committee to accept the amendment as a substitute.
Okay, there's a substitute before us. I need a second. Second. It's moved and second to adopt the substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, Doug, the substitute is before us.
Thank you. As many have said before me, this is a very simple bill. So there are 4 lines, and if you will permit me, I'll just read those lines. The State Board of Corrections shall adopt and implement a standard to ensure the provision of feminine hygiene products to female inmates without charge. The Director of the Department of Corrections shall adopt and implement a standard to ensure the provision of feminine hygiene products to female prisoners without charge. A little background. Right now, the availability of menstrual products or feminine hygiene products for incarcerated women is not necessarily guaranteed. Some jails, some prisons sell them, some don't. It's a highly variable situation, and the ones that do sell them, the price varies. Sometimes it's more than a woman earns in a month, and it's frequently a lot more than those products are available outside the jail or prison. And I'm sure you'll all agree with me that menstrual products are a basic biological need, they're not a choice. And making access to these necessities difficult or impossible is actually discrimination, whether there's that intent or not. I would quote August 1st, 2016, Department of Correction operating procedures says that these products will be available for purchase and that an identified indigent offender may receive some consideration. Asking an incarcerated woman to identify herself as indigent in order to receive feminine hygiene products, I think is unnecessary and puts that woman in an undignified position. I have a little background that I would like to present about the female prison population in Virginia. According to the Richmond Times-Dispatch from January 1st, Virginia Virginia's female prison population is rising faster than the male inmate count. I won't read you the rest of the article, but the reason I point that out is because this problem is becoming more significant. And actually, over the past couple of years, the male population basically stayed the same in prisons and jails, but women increased by at least 300 over the past 2 years statewide. That's probably another topic for another day, but at least knowing that that population with those needs is increasing, I think puts more emphasis on my bill. And there are some people who did want to testify.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions of the patron from the committee? Delegate O'Quinn.
Mr. Chairman, does DOC currently charge for every single one of the products that you have covered, or do they just charge for certain ones, or what's the policy on that right now?
They usually do not charge for menstrual pads.
Okay.
But they do charge for others depending on the facility. And I'm also speaking about regional jails as well as prisons. So those are administered differently.
Question, Delegate O'Quinn? You good? Delegate Brewer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it's my understanding that pads are already provided to female inmates, is that correct?
It is not necessarily correct. It is usually they are, but not necessarily. And I'm sorry, Delegate Brewer, but let me elaborate a little bit because I forgot to mention that sometimes the delivery of the products to the inmate who is requesting them takes a long time, and that's another problem.
This sounds like a departmental issue. So I understand that from what I've reached out, is there anyone from Department of Corrections that can speak to what's provided to an inmate?
Yes, there are a number of people here who wanted to testify about the bill.
Okay, any other from the committee, any other questions of the patron at this point? Certainly able to later, but, okay, yes, please.
Yeah, hi, Ray Vargo, Virginia Department of Corrections. And you were asking whether we provide pads and tampons to all of our offenders. They also can purchase them on the commissary if they want a specific brand, but we provide them to them. There's not an access issue with
So
feminine
at all
hygiene
times,
products.
minimum standard.
Delegate Brewer?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. At all times, that is the minimum standard they're provided to inmates, correct?
Correct. Pads have been provided for years, and tampons occasionally, depending on where they were. We've made the policy. We support this bill. The administration supports, and we have made tampons completely available to everyone. And so that's where we are right now.
Ma'am?
Mm-hmm.
So what's the need of the bill if you already do it?
Well, I can only speak for state correctional facilities, so I can't, I believe the bill also addresses local and regional
Right.
jails, so I can't necessarily speak to that.
Understood, my apologies.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I
Yes.
was going to point that out, but also this is new on the Department of Corrections behalf, that they are actually requiring both to be provided. It has been irregular in the past that those products were available.
Okay. Anyone else in the audience wishing to speak in favor? Anyone? Yeah, please come forward and identify yourself.
Hi, my name is Holly Siebold. I'm the founder and executive director of BRAS. We're a nonprofit organization based in Northern Virginia. We provide menstrual supplies to women and girls who are in need. I'm here today, and thank you very much for having me speak today. I'm here today because we've been working with women who are formerly incarcerated for the last 3 years, and the anecdotal feedback that we receive is very different from what has been told to us by the different institutions in Virginia. So in August of 2017, just to give you a little background, the Department of Justice, under the direction of Attorney General Jeff Sessions, issued a memo, and it said that all federal prisons are to ensure that inmates have unobstructed access to menstrual supplies, providing the following items on demand and at no cost. Tampons, they give 2 different options, regular size and super size. maxi pads with wings, regular and supersize, and as well panty liners. However, this mandate only covers federal prisons. We support this bill because it will ensure women in state prisons here in Virginia and the local regional jails also have the same services. As you point out, the population is growing. 30% of incarcerated individuals are female. Yet there seems to be no standard uniform distribution. Pricing is erratic, and the quantity at each of these facilities are not uniform. Based on our research of the last 3 years, we found that they do offer pads, but often they're very low quality, inadequate. And this is not enough to serve women who are very different in their menstrual cycles. The rate of distribution is low and inconsistent, requiring women to use less functional alternatives such as socks and bed sheets and pillowcases in between allocation of pads. Access to additional maxi pads is often degrading and inhumane. If you have a heavy flow each month, you have to women often have to, we've been told, have to show guards used pads in order to prove that they need a new one. We've been told that women, and we've seen it, have to MacGyver pads and turn them into tampons because they last longer. The commissary pricing is inflated. If you look at some of the commissary pricing, you have some of the commissaries at $4 for tampons, and then some are up to $15 for tampons, which is more than it is in the general store, and these women are making nothing. So this is just impossible for people who are destitute. And it often leads to a public health crisis. We've been told by many women who are incarcerated that they often leads to infection and other issues. So by not managing their menstruation, it's causing a public health crisis in the prisons and jails. If you give me just a second also to read some of the testimony, we worked with Friends of Guest House, which is one of the largest in Virginia, formerly for a transitional shelter for formerly incarcerated women. They wanted to come here today, but because of the early morning schedule, they weren't able to secure transportation. So here's from one of the clients that we work with. I still remember how embarrassed I was the first time I had to ask a male corrections officer for a sanitary napkin. When I get around to it, he said. Pads were only provided at no cost at the Northwestern Regional Adult Detention Center. The sad truth is that if you start asking the officer in the morning for pads, you might get a couple by mid-afternoon. Better make them last because they're not going to get any more until the next shift comes on. What did you do with the last few I gave you, the officer would ask, like it was any of their business the way my body works. As I learned to survive as an incarcerated woman, I picked up a few tricks of the trade. Rather than use a pad in its actual form, women have learned how to manipulate them into what is known as a jail tampon. This is actually quite ingenious. It cuts down on how many pads one female goes through. One jail tampon will last twice as long as a pad, and also eliminates the mess and possibly accident factor that is associated with wearing a pad alone. Be aware though, these jail tampons come with a price. If you're caught making one, it's considered contraband, and you could be faced with an in-house charge. Legitimate tampons are sold on commissary for 28 cents a piece. That might not sound like a lot to everyone, but a vast majority of incarcerated women are either on a tight budget or completely indigent. So what other choice do we have? Women who are incarcerated already have paid their debt to society. They have made mistakes, but that should not bar them from common human necessities. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my experience. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor?
Mr. Chairman, I'm John Jones, the Sheriff's Association. I want to thank Delegate Corey for the amendment in the nature of a substitute. The original bill went to a great deal of detail in the state code of what we needed to provide. There is a jail standard now that addressed this. I think it's something like the mandatory articles necessary for maintaining proper personal hygiene are available to all inmates. That's in the jail standards now, and the jail standards have the full effect of law. The reason I support it is because there's nothing wrong with the Board of Corrections looking at it to make sure that, it is available. If you want to have different kinds, whether it be pads or tampons, some jails provide both, some don't. Some provide the minimum and make it available through a commissary. But we support the amendment in the nature of a substitute because it allows the Board of Corrections to review the issue. We have no problem with that. And I don't know of any jail that doesn't provide the basics.
Thank you. Mr.
Chairman, Mike Edwards with Kemper Consulting on behalf of the Association of Major Jails. We also support the bill. We want to thank Delegate Corey for drafting the amendment nature of substitute. Just to follow along on Mr. Jones's comments, this will make this an inspection standard, and we make it a standard within the Board of Corrections litany of responsibilities that jails must comply with. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Scott Price. I'm representing the Alliance for Progressive Virginia. This is a bill that we have an interest in, and we are very supportive of it. This is a matter of basic human dignity, and I think that it says something about a society, the way it treats those it has power over. I will tell you that this is extremely important to our membership. I fielded calls last night from my president, from my former president, from my former policy director, and from a number of, frankly, irate members who wanted us to take a stand on this bill, and we would hope they do pass it.
Okay, anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Okay, just, one comment that I would make is that, and Delegate Brewer touched on it a little bit earlier. I mean, we have processes in place, and I would say any failures we have are more result of the individuals implementing those processes than the institutions in the process themselves. Okay, so just that's.
No,
Yes, please.
I just wanted to say that you're correct, and this bill does provide a mechanism to oversee and ensure that those individual problems do not.
Delegate Sewell.
Mr. Chairman, I can tell you it's hard for me to function throughout the day with having the wrong type of boxers on. I can only imagine what these women are going through. I think that the bill, the bill just achieves parity at the regional and local level as we have with federal and state. So I think it's just a great idea to provide that basic dignity to the women being served.
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Brewer.
I'd just like to, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to make a statement. While I appreciate everyone's testimony in this issue, I don't appreciate the assertion that anyone in our prisons in Virginia are living in a third world situation here without basic needs, because I think we clearly heard from DOC that there is a minimum standard and there is something provided. Local and regional jails here also are providing that. So, I don't want people to be so worked up as to think that there isn't a minimum standard being provided, because I think that's an untrue assertion. So I want to say that on record.
Brewer, I think you need to know that these guarantees of provision are very recent and only have come about, a few of them, after my bill was filed. So I agree with you. We don't want that reputation, and I'm delighted that we don't deserve it, I think, or won't soon deserve it. Thank you.
Yeah, please.
Motion report refer to approves.
Okay, there is a motion to report and refer. There will be physical impact.
Actually, sir, in the first iteration of the bill, the estimate was around $33,000, and that could be absorbed by the department.
We have been, Mr. Chairman, we have been requested to send appropriations and report.
Yeah,
Thank you for asking.
Sure. But, so there is a motion to report and refer to appropriations. Is there a second?
Second.
Properly seconded. All those in favor indicate so. Shall we come vote on your bill?
I do have to, yeah. No, it's all right. I'm just.
Okay, please close the rolls. The motion to report and refer House Bill 83 passes 6-0. Thank you, Delegate. Okay, Delegate Hope.
Yeah, I have House Bill 797, and Mr. Chairman, I have a line amendment that I will read. When you're ready.
Just give me a second.
line 16, I want you to delete that entire sentence. However, no fee shall be charged for communication between prisoners and third parties within any state correctional facility or operations thereto operated or controlled by the state correctional facility. And then on line 19, I want you to strike the words lowest available rates allowing for the. And what I'll do is I will read, the first sentence stays in place, that starts with the director, and then it picks up reading, any state correctional facility that utilizes such system shall establish such system with the security needs of the facility. And then it continues. So you see what I've done, I've just struck the words, I haven't added anything. And I will speak to that.
Okay, let's get the bill as amended before us. Is there a motion to accept the amendments? Moved and second to adopt the amendments. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, the bill's amended before.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This has been through a lot of conversations with advocates in the Department of Corrections. And the purpose of the bill, I think everyone recognizes and appreciates that people who are incarcerated, trying to open up avenues for them to stay in connections with their family, especially their children more than anything else, because we know most of these inmates will eventually get out, and we want them to have a base to come home to. The Department of Corrections has done a terrific job in trying to work with the phone calls and trying to get those rates as low as they possibly can to make sure that communication helps. One of the things, the new things that has come on in the last few years is things like Facebook and Skype, FaceTime, so things like that. It's not called that, but it's, you know, use those, and so you're familiar with it. This electronic visitation. And so these offer great opportunities for, you know, rather than just the phone, you hear a voice and you see a face. And that's also something very encouraging. So what we've started to do, and they've done this with the phones through executive order, through Governor McAuliffe's executive order and the director of the Department of Corrections. We're trying to do similar things with electronic visitation. And so this bill only does a couple things. One is it asks the director to promulgate regulations for this type of communication, and it says that electronic visitation cannot replace in-person visits. What I've seen happen in other states is that other states that have incorporated the electronic visitation, they've taken away in-person visits, and we don't want that to ever happen. It's nice, you know, when you live very far away, to have this opportunity to do that, but some people do want to have the in-person sort of face-to-face interaction. And so that's what the bill does. Asks to promulgate regulations for electronic visitation, and it says that electronic visitation shall not replace in-person visits that you currently do it. And that's all the bill does. And so I know I think we have people here to testify in favor, maybe not. Anyone here? They may not be here, Mr. Chairman, but I know Virginia Cure has been working on this. You probably got emails from John Forrest from SALT in support of this bill. It all goes back to that notion that trying to keep people in communication and in touch with one another is extremely important for this population.
Okay. Is there questions of the patrons from the committee? Any questions of the patron?
Does the department want to say anything?
Okay, yeah, is there anyone in the audience wishing to speak in favor of the measure?
Mr. Chairman, Scott Price, Alliance for Progressive Virginia, and we support the bill. We think that it's important that people have connections. That sometimes it's the only thing that keeps them going, and it's important that those connections are personal and in person. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone with a department wishing to weigh in? I'll put you on the spot, but.
Well,
I mean, you have a position or?
well, the administration doesn't have a position, but this is reflective of things that we're currently doing. We support in-person visitation with our 22% recidivism rate. Reentry visitation, in-person visitation is a huge part of that, but also video visitation can supplement that, especially for our people who, have great distances to travel, it really is a lower cost option.
Yeah.
And we strive to make everything as affordable as we can within the means of it.
Would you report the amendment that I discussed?
Okay, committee, please.
Mr. Chairman, we're just going to strike a different phrase, and like you struck in the sentence that begins with any state correctional facility that utilizes such system shall establish such system, and instead of saying with the security needs of the facility, we're gonna say allowing for the security needs of the facility.
Okay. All right, can someone move that amendment, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt that amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the bill, as amended is before us. Any further questions? Okay, is there a, moved and seconded to report the bill. All those in favor signify by saying so on the voting board. Please close the rolls. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Delegate Helsel.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I apologize for being late. Thank you for holding on until I could get here. I hope you appreciate that.
We haven't missed an election.
Okay, good deal. We're looking at House Bill 1412. I'll make it very short. 1412 is simply requires fire departments and emergency medical service agencies to develop some curriculum to deal with mental health. More and more every day, first responders are running into incidences where some training in mental health probably would come in handy for them. So we've checked where the firefighters are on board with it. We did exempt volunteers, given that those folks are primarily in the rural areas. They're probably away from instruction. So we just exempted them. However, I might add that some of them are taking the training. They arranged to get people into their departments and help them with that. And quite frankly, there are a good number of fire departments throughout Virginia that are currently offering what this bill wants to accomplish. So with that, Mr. Chairman, let's take your questions if I need to.
Okay, questions of the patron from the committee? Delegate Helsel.
Yes, sir.
Why would the firemen be in favor of more requirements placed upon them?
Good question.
They say they spend a lot of time training.
They did.
And so
They did.
forth, and here's another.
That's right.
Just help me understand.
Well, for mental health in particular, I mean, we all know that mental health is a top of the line issue anymore. These folks are running into those cases where they have to deal or may have to deal with someone who is having a mental health issue. Proper training is not on scene, and that could be detrimental to the person that they are on the scene to help. I don't know if that answers your question. You know, your concern about training is absolutely right on it. But there are so many, and you're right, there are so many rules and regulations for fire departments to abide by, and you're right, this is another one. But this is one that they requested, that they want. You know, I thought months and months and months ago, I was in a volunteer company for 25, almost 30 years. We took a lot of training out of our area. Other jurisdictions that had propane training or natural gas training, all of those kinds of things that they now, quite frankly, have at their fingertips. But you're absolutely right in your assumption. I would just say that they feel like they need to understand a person when they get to a scene who may be having some sort of a mental issue going on.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Delegate Brewer?
question for patron.
Yes, ma'am.
So this bill also would extend to volunteer fire companies?
I'm sorry.
This bill also extends, as it's written, to volunteer fire companies. 27-601.
Let me look.
Also means,
Only uses the term, he doesn't use the term fire company, which you didn't have.
What line?
27601?
Yeah.
Differentiates?
Yes.
27.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
Yep.
I just wanna make sure we're not putting our volunteer fire departments on the hook for something they can't afford.
Your bill only deals with the definition of fire department,
Okay.
not the definition of fire company, which is where the volunteers are.
Oh, okay.
So you're right, your bill does not deal with volunteers.
Okay.
We only use one of the two terms.
But let it be noted, as the delegate said, that volunteers are volunteering to receive the training, so.
Our community is offering it
Yeah.
to them, and granted, they don't have the volunteers they used to, but they still do depend on the volunteers.
Any other questions from the committee? Anyone, I didn't allow much time, but
Yeah.
that was on purpose. Anyone in the audience wishing to speak in favor of the measure? Anyone wishing to speak in favor?
Mr. Chairman, Ed Rhodes, representing Virginia Professional Firefighters and also Virginia Association of Volunteer Rescue Squads. The bill originated from the VPFF. The Volunteer Rescue Squads voted 2 years ago to be included in this legislation. They have already adopted a program, already have gotten 2 of their people certified as instructors, and they're teaching classes now throughout the state to any volunteer rescue squad, even a commercial agency that wants to take the class. It's necessary on both sides for what we see, what we do, and how we act, and you can be able to kind of keep an eye on each other in the building. As Delegate Brewer was answered, this is strictly for the career side, because they're there for 24 hours. So you can pick up on people's actions and how they feel after a call or 2 or 3 weeks after a call. So we do support the bill, and we would hope that you would too. Thank you.
Anyone in the audience wishing to speak in opposition? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Any other questions of the committee? I have just, right, so, but this mental health training, that's what we're calling it now. So I'm seeing it as it's pretty broad. You're also looking, the training, there's gonna be things implemented to be internal. I mean, again, you know, the fire person, but then also preparing the firemen for out in the field.
Exactly.
It's all, okay.
Yes, sir. PTSD would be a good example.
Okay. Yeah, it's not just what you're, when you're reporting to the scene, what you may, looking for signs there, but it's also gonna be an interdepartmental evaluation.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Mr. Rhodes?
There's nothing in here dictating what kind of class. It just needs to be a mental health class. What VAVRS is teaching is mental health first aid. It's I believe an 8-hour class, and they do it on weekends. There's a 2-hour class, that could be a 40-hour class. It's whatever the agency or the department wants to do, and they can do it on duty.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to report.
All right, it's a motion to.
Second.
A motion to report and properly seconded. All those in favor signify on the voting board. Okay, please close the rolls. The matter of what I'm going to talk about is similar to what I've brought before this subcommittee before, and it is the fact there are disputes about how big the problem is, but our felons who committed crimes prior to the change in law in 1995 that are still in prison were sentenced by judges and juries that had some kind of preset notion just from their living before sentencing guidelines were that we have the kind of sentence guidelines we have now, that they would be out of prison in a certain amount of time. You know, if they got a 30-year prison sentence, the judge would think, well, with good behavior, he'll be out in 20 years or 15 years. And those were all reasons why we passed the law in 1994 that led to sentencing guidelines. But the problem is the parole rate, went from 40% to about 3%. Nobody was really getting paroled. Now, so this legislation was drafted in response to the inequity in sentencing between these old law and new law inmates, and the Virginia Criminal Sentencing Commission flagged this issue first in 2009, and in the final report and recommendation of the Governor's Commission on Parole Review flagged it again 2 years ago. The 2009 commission found that hundreds of parole eligible inmates that already served longer than they would have served for the same offense had they been sentenced under the post-parole, tough on crime sentencing guidelines that came into effect in '95. So this legislation has been workshopped over the past couple sessions, and it's different. It's a if I could use the term, watered down version right now. This legislation does not require the release of any of the select of these old law inmates. Instead, it requires a parole board to provide justification for their continued incarceration beyond the period of time prescribed for the same offense under the current sentencing guidelines. So the legislation will require the parole board provide careful evaluation of the cases of these select inmates, and their decisions would have to be based solely on the progress of the inmate's rehabilitation, including aspects such as their history, character, and conduct while incarcerated. Many of these old law inmates, year after year, continue to receive the same justification. There was a checklist, there still is a checklist. A few years ago, with the support of this committee, we asked them to provide a more fulsome, and this passed into law, explanation of why they denied parole. They haven't followed what we told them to do. They're still, because they're overloaded, they don't, this is what they say, they don't have the researchers, and so they have some sentences and they check boxes, and these inmates get the same check box every year due to the seriousness of the crime. So they could be trying hard to put their life, or maybe they have put their life right years ago, and they get the same reason for denial. Some of these people are in the, over 60 years old now, highly unlikely to commit another crime. Some of them, to be honest, are some of the worst that should ever get out. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we need, because it's such an important issue to families and people, we need to evaluate this more. And I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if you were to support this proposal this morning, whether you had a note that could be sent to appropriations, but I think it probably should be. And because if you were to like the concept, because I've got budget amendment in to provide, after talking to my good friend Brian Moran, they need more people to research the certain conditions that happen to make sure they're knowing the right thing. The parole board does not have time, and this is a crime in a sense, because these people are sitting in jail, but we don't have people with time to evaluate the case and put together a document on whether they are serving longer than they would have if they committed a crime in 1996. Because there are people out there that committed the same crime in 1996 that have served the time and they're out on the street again. But these are before, and they used to have theoretically have parole, don't have parole. I do think the current control board, under the leadership of Adrienne Bennett, is doing a better job, and she's working on geriatric guidelines too, because we're getting more and more, our prison population is getting old. So anyway, that's what this bill does. It just requires a more fulsome analysis of each of these cases, and to say, you know, you can take the serious nature of the inmate's offense into account, but you have to look at these other things in his or her life as well. And so that's what it does. It's a 1 or 2 sentence bill. You can see that on, I don't know if you want to read it. Have any questions?
Questions of the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I know that there are several members that have meetings right now. I think for, in respect for the patron, I have a motion.
I mean, we would, even if you have to go, we'd still maintain a quorum, wouldn't we, Councilman?
How many people would have to go? You need 4 in the room, so.
You have to go, we'd still have 4. So, yeah, if you need to. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Um,
Well, I'll wait till this one's done.
Yeah, I mean, I think, any questions of the committee or the patron? Okay, anyone in the audience wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Wes Nance. I'm Commonwealth's attorney in Bedford County, speaking on behalf of the Virginia Association of Commonwealth's Attorneys. It is Vaca's read of this bill that it actually severely limits what the parole board can look at, that it will only be looking at sentencing guidelines and the behavior of this individual after they are incarcerated. And just as the patron said, this is a very important bill, and it's a very important issue not only for the offender, but the victims and the families of the victims of these crimes. And we're afraid that this, instead of having a totality of the circumstances approach for the parole board, limits them from talking about the severity or the mitigating circumstances of the offense, and also excludes the victims and the victims' families' voices from these proceedings. And that is why we oppose it. Thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Who said that? I did. Well, I would just like to ask a question. I mean, do the Commonwealth's attorneys think there could be a problem here of equity about the post-sentencing, post-95 sentencing? And if you do, I've been waiting for help from you for years, because I don't disagree with what you said beyond that. And this bill doesn't do that either, as far as taking the input from, we want to look at the totality of the case.
Well, sir, but our reading of the bill was that it was only looking, instead of pulling that away, it was only looking at these guidelines. And unfortunately, these guidelines are specifically built for where there is truth in sentencing. The individuals that we're discussing are individuals who were not that always had the ability to have parole and still do. And so to now have apples and oranges, you're having a person who was sentenced under apples now having orange guidelines associated with it is actually inconsistent with the system that was then and the system that is now.
But Mr. Chairman, the guidelines that came were tough on crime. They were tougher than what we had prior. It's not like they had easier sentencing. I mean, people thought that they were easier sentencing, people being let out on the street. We passed the tougher sentencing guidelines, but now people are in jail beyond what are the tougher guidelines. And I want to know what your answer to that is. I mean, how can we, if there's a matter of inequity, how can we deal with it?
Well, I don't, yeah, in all due respect, John Sickles.
I mean, no one's ever come talk to me about this,
Okay.
and so I hear this, you know.
Well, I would encourage, yeah, but we're not gonna hash that out here at this spot. I appreciate your testimony. Delta Brewer, do you have a question?
In light of it, seems the patron and our guests would like to hash this out. I'd like to make a motion to PBI so they can work this out amongst themselves.
Can you force them to do that?
There's a motion on the tape, and I would, Doug Sickles, I appreciate your, what you said, it is, regardless of what we do, it can, as you said, the parole process is
Morphy, you had a substitute motion?
I have a substitute motion to report and refer.
All right.
Second.
There's a motion to report and refer House Bill 1243, report and refer to appropriations. All those in favor of that motion, please signify on the voting board. Okay, that motion fails.
Trying to say yes, and it's not getting recorded, so we can be sure.
Okay.
Oh, it can't.
Okay, please close the voting board.
We just don't have
That motion fails on a tie.
Thank you.
And, well, so that motion, that was to report and refer. Do we need another motion, or that's the end of the bill?
Well, if, Mr. Chairman, if I'm not mistaken, if we had approved a motion to PBI the bill